It was one of those evenings when the world seemed to slow down just a little. The sun was dipping beneath the horizon, painting the sky in long streaks of orange and pink. Cars rolled lazily along the stretch of highway outside of town, their headlights beginning to glow as night slowly replaced day. Among them was a small silver sedan, weaving its way down the asphalt. Inside sat a young woman, 21 years old, with her music playing low. The window cracked open just enough to let in the cooling air. Her name was Emily. She was just like any other young adult, trying to balance the pressures of school, work, and the pull of social media that seemed to demand her attention at every waking moment. Friends texted constantly, notifications buzzed in her pocket, and as much as she told herself not to look while driving, temptation was always there. On that evening, Emily was on her way home from a late class. She had promised her mother she'd be home in time for dinner. But as she merged onto the main road, her phone buzzed again. It was her best friend sending her a funny meme. She glanced down, telling herself it would take only a second. 1 second to check. 1 second to laugh. That second, as it always does on the road, mattered more than she could have imagined. Up ahead, a family SUV was slowing down to make a left turn into their neighborhood. A father at the wheel, his wife beside him, and their 2 children in the back, chatting about the day, looking forward to a quiet evening at home. Their blinker flashed, a steady rhythm of orange against the fading sky. They had no idea what was about to happen. Emily's eyes darted back to the road just in time to see the brake lights. But too late to stop. The impact was sudden, violent, and final. Metal screamed against metal, glass shattered, and the peaceful evening was replaced with chaos. Her small sedan plowed into the back of the SUV, sending it spinning into the opposite lane. By the time the screeching of tires and the crunch of steel gave way to silence, the family's vehicle was a crumpled wreck. Sirens would come later, but in that moment, there was only the sickening stillness that follows disaster. Emily sat in her car, hands shaking, the phone still clutched in her lap, her breath coming in panicked gasps. She had never felt so small, so utterly powerless. Minutes stretched like hours before flashing lights painted the road red and blue. Police and paramedics swarmed the scene. Neighbors came running from their homes, their faces pale, their voices trembling as they asked the same haunting question. Are they alive? The truth was devastating. The parents in the SUV did not survive. Their children were pulled from the wreckage, injured and screaming for their mom and dad. The sound carried across the night like a wound. Emily could hear it even as officers pulled her aside, even as questions rained down on her, even as the reality of what she had done began to set in. In the days that followed, the story made headlines. Young woman kills family while texting and driving. The words were brutal, printed in bold across newspapers and screamed across social media. Strangers filled the comments sections with rage. They called her a murderer. They said she deserved to rot in prison. Some demanded the harshest punishment the law could allow. But others saw her differently. They saw a young woman who made a terrible mistake, one that could happen to anyone who had ever glanced at their phone behind the wheel. They remembered the times they had done it themselves, the moments of weakness where they told themselves they were in control, that nothing bad would happen. Emily's trial became a battlefield of perspectives. The prosecution painted her as reckless, as someone who chose her phone over the lives of an innocent family. They pointed to the string of unread messages on her device, the evidence that she was distracted for far longer than she admitted. They argued it wasn't just negligence, it was depraved indifference, the kind of behavior that deserved the same weight as murder. The defense countered with a different story. Emily was not a hardened criminal. She was not violent. She had no record, no history of recklessness. She was a student, a daughter, a friend. They argued this was a tragedy, yes, but not murder. To call it murder was to ignore the millions of drivers who made the same mistake every day and simply hadn't yet faced the consequences. The courtroom was packed with emotion. The surviving family of the victim sat silently, their grief heavy in the air. Every time Emily looked their way, her chest tightened. She wanted to apologize, to beg for forgiveness, but the words caught in her throat. What apology could ever make up for the lives she had taken? Witnesses came forward. Police officers, accident reconstruction experts, even psychologists who spoke about the compulsive nature of phone use. They described how our brains are wired to respond to the ping of a notification, how young people especially are vulnerable to the illusion that they can multitask behind the wheel. And yet, beneath all the science and arguments, the fact remained. 2 people were dead. 2 children had lost their parents. No explanation, no psychological analysis, no courtroom defense could erase that. When Emily took the stand, the room held its breath. Her voice was small, trembling, but clear. She admitted she had looked at her phone. She admitted she hadn't thought. And she admitted she would live with that choice for the rest of her life. She said she wished it had been her instead of them. She said she couldn't close her eyes without seeing the crash, without hearing the screams of the children. Her words brought some in the courtroom to tears, but others shook their heads. To them, remorse didn't change the outcome. Remorse didn't bring anyone back. The jury was left with the impossible task of deciding, was Emily guilty of murder or guilty only of negligence? Should she spend decades behind bars? Or should her punishment reflect the fact that she never intended for anyone to die? In the end, the case became bigger than Emily. It became a symbol of a larger problem. A society addicted to its phones, unwilling to disconnect even when lives were at stake. Some saw her as an example, a warning to others. Others saw her as a scapegoat, carrying the weight of a mistake too many people had already made. As the judge prepared to read the verdict, Emily closed her eyes. She thought of her mother waiting for her that night, of the family she had destroyed, of the life she once imagined for herself. No matter what the jury decided, she knew she would never be free. She was already serving a life sentence, trapped in the memory of that 1 second, that one glance at a glowing screen that changed everything. And so the question remains, the one that lingers in every heart and every home when the story is told. Was Emily guilty of murder, or guilty only of being human in a moment of weakness? Was she a criminal or a cautionary tale? Guilty or not?